Hey guys, Dan here with this week's movie reviews for some of the new streaming films. I'm not doing the daily quarantine videos anymore. I mean, I've only missed one day so far with everything, but I made it 68 days straight through. But I'm now back to work kind of part-time, and The Connors is over for the season. Masked Singer is over for the season. So I'm not going to be doing daily videos anymore, but I'm definitely going to be doing probably like 4 or 5 still a week, because I've got my Dan Does Disney series, and then Frasier Friday is ending, but we're turning that into Freaks and Geeks Friday, so we're going to start doing episode reviews of Freaks and Geeks. And then, of course, my weekly TV reviews, and I'm going to keep doing the movie reviews as long as it makes sense. Once theaters open back up and all the brand new movies are out, probably not so much, but I've been doing these reviews every week about some of the movies that were supposed to be in theaters and are now direct to you on demand at home. So we have 4 of those this week. We're going to do Scoob, the new Scooby-Doo movie. I wore my shirt for the occasion. Then we've got The Lovebirds, which is on Netflix, and usually I do the Netflix videos, or Netflix movies rather, in their own video, and pair like 3 or 4 Netflix movies together. But The Lovebirds was supposed to be released in theaters before Netflix bought the rights to it, so it sort of counts for this. And then we've got Capone, which is a new Tom Hardy movie that was supposed to be in theaters. And then for my 4th selection every week, I try to find something a little off the beaten path, something maybe I wouldn't have known about if it weren't for the quarantine, and I was searching out some extra things. So this week we have a movie called Blue Story. And I try to pick movies with pretty good Rotten Tomato scores so that hopefully they'll be good. This one has a 91% on Rotten, so we'll see what I thought of it. But first, let's get to Scoob. This is a movie that was supposed to be in theaters about 2 weeks ago, and they decided, instead of pushing back the date, much like Universal did with Trolls, Warner Brothers said, you know what, we're just going to put it out for you, and you can check it out at your leisure. This is available at all of your normal online places. The stats I usually give are for Amazon Prime Video specifically, just because that's the one I usually use. But you can rent this on Prime Video for $19.99 for a 48-hour window, or you could buy it for $25. Universal didn't have any of the buying options for their movies, just rent only. So it's interesting that Warner Brothers went that route with it. But basically, this is sort of a reboot of the series, I guess, because it does sort of give us a background at the very beginning of how Shaggy and Scooby met, and then how they met the other 3 from the Mystery Inc. I don't think that's exactly how it went in the history of the cartoons, and of course we had the Scooby-Doo Kids show at some point in the 80s when they were all kids and they were already together. That was, I guess it was called A Pup Named Scooby-Doo, right? But anyway, my history with Scooby-Doo goes back to when I was very, very young. I just talked about this actually yesterday when Tim and I were reviewing Ichabod and Mr. Toad for Disney, because the first episode of Scooby-Doo that I ever saw was the Sleepy Hollow one, and it scared the bejesus out of me, and I had nightmares, and so I wasn't allowed to watch Scooby-Doo for like a couple more years after that. So I've been, back with Scooby-Doo since the beginning, and as I am 70s born kid, a child of the 80s, I remember all of the different iterations. Scrappy-Doo, Dino-Mutt, Scooby-Dum, Pup Named Scooby-Doo, and then, sort of fell off, so I haven't watched any of the things in the last probably 20 years, the Cartoon Network shows, or the movies, or anything like that. So, I'm more old school Scooby-Doo with all the guest stars, Phyllis Diller, and the Harlem Globetrotters, and all that. So, but anyway, this is, potentially the first in a series of Hanna-Barbera related features that Warner Brothers hopes to make into some sort of cinematic universe. Everybody's got to have a cinematic universe these days. You can't just have a standalone movie. It's ridiculous in 2020 to think that. So that's why we have a few characters, I think, extra in this movie than we needed, but I'll get to that. But essentially, Scooby and Shaggy meet each other on the beach one day. Shaggy has no friends. Scooby's running from the police. So they meet up. And then at Halloween night, a couple years later, they meet the other 3. They go in this haunted house. And they decide they want to solve mysteries for a living. So The gang gets split up pretty early on in this movie because entrepreneur Simon Cowell, voicing himself, tells them that he is willing to go in on the business with them, the Mystery Inc., but without Shaggy and Scooby. They're useless. Get them out of here. So eventually they get into some peril, and the other three, of course, are trying to rescue them. So they end up coming back together in the end. But for most of the movie, they're separated. And so that was one of my issues with the film. Another one would be, like I mentioned, the extra characters in this movie really feel shoehorned in, and it feels a lot actually like Universal's The Mummy with Tom Cruise, which I defended. I gave that movie a B-. I thought it was fine. Everyone slammed it, but one of my big issues with it was the introduction of the Dr. Jekyll, Mr. Hyde character, because they were trying to start off a new Universal Monsters world, much like Universal had in the 1930s, but, you know, that whole portion of the plot seems so shoehorned in, and we get the same here with Scoob, because they meet Captain Caveman, which is like, it's so out of the realm of like the plot, and it just is sort of silly. And I like Captain Caveman. I used to watch the show. In fact, I just rewatched the Captain Caveman episodes from the 70s probably 2 years ago when I got the DVD. So I'm well versed in Captain Caveman. That's fine. Tracy Morgan voices him, which is funny. But it seems so superfluous to anything else going on. And so that definitely hurt the plot as well. Now, voice-wise, I think they found some good people. I was a little bit annoyed, actually, that they did not ask Matthew Lillard to do Shaggy, because he played Shaggy in the live-action movies, and that led to him becoming the voice of Shaggy on all the subsequent cartoon series and the full-length movies once Casey Kasem retired, I don't know, about 10 years ago, probably by now. But they didn't even ask Matthew Lillard to be a part of it. He found out, in one of the trade magazines that, it's going to be Will Forte voicing Shaggy. And to be honest, I think Will Forte did a great job. I sort of bashed his vocal performance the other week with The Willoughbys on Netflix, but I don't know. I actually thought he was right on the money here. So it's got that going for him. But some of the other characters I thought were very well voiced. You had Mark Wahlberg as Blue Falcon, who is one of the side characters that kind of teams up. And then you've got Gina Rodriguez doing Velma. Zac Efron is a great Fred. He was perfect. I didn't even know that was him for a while. And then Amanda Seyfried as Daphne. All of those are good. And you've got Frank Welker as Scooby-Doo. Now, Frank Welker has been a part of this series since the very, very beginning. He voiced Fred for about 40 years or so. And then he's been doing, or maybe he still does Fred, I don't know. But he took over Scooby-Doo in 2002, so he's been doing Scooby-Doo for almost 20 years now in the cartoons. Maybe he is still doing Fred in the cartoons. God bless him. That's cool. That's a great, nod to the original show. And, of course, a sort of bridge to the new version, since he is voicing Scooby-Doo in the new version as well. So that's all great. But yeah, plot-wise, it was a little down for me. But I did like the Hanna-Barbera references. Like, they completely replicated the original Scooby-Doo Where Are You theme song for the intro to the movie, and I mean, they did it perfectly. They had to reanimate it, obviously, because it's all CGI now, and everybody looks a little different. But they did it pretty much like, shot for shot. So I thought that was cool. And then, to have Dick Dastardly be the main villain. Dick Dastardly and Muttley, who have been part of the Hanna-Barbera crew since the 70s. They were part of Wacky Races. They might have been part of Scooby's Laugh Olympics. I don't remember. But, look, I thought those were nice touches, and make sense if they're trying to start a Hanna-Barbera universe, that they would have, one of the classic Hanna-Barbera villains. I just don't think the Captain Caveman stuff was necessary at all. I didn't mind Tracy Morgan as the voice, but, like, it didn't add up for me. But I did get a few laughs out of this movie, for sure. I think because of the Dick Dastardly subplot and because of recreating the original theme, I think parents and kids will like this movie together. I really do. I think in that sense it's a better option than Trolls World Tour was for the at-home quarantine viewing. Is it great? No, but I wouldn't mind them, keeping this going, because I do think the voice acting is real strong here. I think they picked good people. It is unfortunate, though, that Matthew Lillard, didn't get asked to do Shaggy. But, I do think Will Forte did a good job, so I can't really slag that. I just think it would have been kind of nice to ask him to do that. But, who voices Dick Dastardly, too? He's the only one I think I didn't really say. Jason Isaacs. Okay, well, I don't really know him, but he played Lucius in the Harry Potter series, so there you go. But he did a good job there. Simon Cowell himself, and there's a few other sort of Easter eggs in there. Henry Winkler voices a role. Who else? I don't know. Don Messick, they sort of did archive voices from him from way back in the 60s and 70s, which is kind of cool. So, listen, this was definitely made with love from the team at Warner Brothers. There's no doubt about that. And I do think if they're going to start a Hanna-Barbera extended universe, this is not a bad film to start it with. But plot-wise, I think it could have been helped a little bit. And I hate it that they were separated pretty much the whole movie. Like, I know sometimes they'll go into a haunted house together and they'll separate, for a scene. But, to have Scooby and Shaggy separated from the rest of the group for like an hour was, I don't know, a little bit ill-advised to me. But anyway, it's a slight positive. I leave Scoob with a B-. Up next, we're going to talk about The Lovebirds. This is, like I said, on Netflix. It was originally supposed to go to theaters, but Netflix bought the rights to it. And this stars Issa Rae from TV's Insecure and Kumail Nanjiani from Silicon Valley, but also he's done a few movies as well. I mean, Issa Rae's done movies too. I just reviewed one not too long ago, maybe a month ago, and then she also did the movie Little last year, which was sort of like the Big in reverse. But Kumail Nanjiani, hilarious. The Big Sick is one of my favorite movies of that year for sure. And so, what happens when the two of them team up? They play Gibran and Leilani, and they're basically a couple who is sputtering out on their last legs. They've been together about 4 years, and we see a lot of fighting in the first few scenes. First we see sort of their courtship, and then we flash forward to a few years later, and they're just screaming at each other, very uncomfortable. And in fact, they decide, you know what, we got to break up. Like, I can't do this anymore. We're done. They're on their way to a friend's party, and basically right when they say like we're done, this is over, a bicyclist hits their front windshield, and they're like, oh my god, like what's going on? Like, we weren't looking at the road. And then this guy gets in the car and is like, I'm a cop. Follow that guy. He's a criminal. They're like, oh my god, okay, like go for it, whatever. And I'm not doing spoilers because this is part of the trailer. So if you saw the trailer, you know this little factoid. But that ain't a cop. So now they're on the run basically from this guy because he catches up to the bicyclist and just runs over him backwards and forwards. And that's all in the trailer. So I'm not going to say any more about that. But then these two team up to basically run from the law because they are now, suspects in this murder case, essentially, because as they're sort of happening upon the body after the dude leaves, these other people come up and start taking pictures, and they're like, oh my god, like, we're going to call 911 on you, you killed this person. They're like, no, we didn't. But so now they're on the run. So, okay, this is an R-rated comedy for sure. And, we've had a couple good runs of R-rated comedies. We had, in my lifetime, going back to the late 70s, I guess we had a few too, but I was way too young for them. Like Animal House kind of kick-started the whole thing, and then you had like Porky's and Police Academy and all that. So, but in my adult life, American Pie in '99 kind of kick-started a whole thing, and then we had Scary Movie and a lot of those R-rated, sort of more gross-out comedies, I guess. And then about 10 years after that, we had The Hangover and Judd Apatow movies and Paul Feig movies, sort of ushering in this new era of R-rated movies, the 21 Jump Street series, and all these. And so for about 5 or 6 years, it was great. There was so many good R-rated comedies. Oh my god, Horrible Bosses and Spy and a lot of the directors I mentioned, a lot of the Apatow movies were great. Bad Teacher is one of my favorites. And then it just really started to fall off. They all became very standard, very rote. It was more about silliness and how many times can you swear and how many penis jokes can you make. And in my mind, there hasn't been too many good R-rated comedies in the last 4 to 5 years. Now, things like The Big Sick, okay, they're R-rated, but I don't really count them as R-rated comedies because they're not raunchy. It's R-rated because of the themes and because they drop a couple of F-bombs here and there. But I don't consider that really in that class. But so last year I didn't think there were any. I mean, the last Kumail Nanjiani movie, Stuber, I thought was very poor. And there's been a lot in that vein. The year before had a lot, but not many that were good. There were a lot that were average. I Feel Pretty was okay. Life at the Party with Melissa McCarthy was okay. Blockers I thought was okay. Game Night I loved. Game Night was the last, to me, really good R-rated comedy. This is in the same league. The Lovebirds, man, I laughed so hard at that movie last night. And I was just watching it by myself, which sometimes I laugh at things by myself. Sometimes I don't. And I kind of think, oh, okay, that's funny. But I don't really belly laugh. Oh my God. I was laughing so hard at this movie. First of all, I really like both of these people. I don't love all their projects. Like I said, Kumail's last movie, Stuber, I thought was actually pretty bad. And Issa Rae is pretty consistent. Little was average, but I really like her show Insecure. And I think she's very funny. And the two of them together, it's great because they definitely, there is chemistry there, but there's also a lack of chemistry there, which I think is purposeful because they were just about to break up. So it makes sense. But the way you could see how they got together in the first place, because their sense of humor is very similar. They, are on the same page with certain things. So you could see how their characters would have made it to begin with. But, the sort of running away thing reminded me a little bit of Date Night with Tina Fey and Steve Carell, which is another great movie. I don't know, is that R-rated or not? I have that on my shelf here. I don't know if that's R-rated or it might be PG-13. Why doesn't it say on the DVD what it's rated? I don't know. But anyway, that was a really good movie, Date Night. Wow, it's weird it doesn't say. Oh, but it says it's an extended version, so maybe that's why it's not really rated, because it's the extended. But anyway, it doesn't matter. Point being, The Lovebirds is hilarious. I think it's one of those movies where it's okay, the situations are definitely exaggerated. Would this happen in the real world? Of course not. It's silly and it's exaggerated. But much like Horrible Bosses, much like a lot of these other movies that I really like on the R-rated comedy side, everything here that happens has real consequences. And if it were to happen in the real world, even though it's very exaggerated, but if it did happen in the real world, everything that happens in the movie would actually happen. So in that sense, it makes sense. But, every new character we meet is is this going to be part of the people that killed this guy, or is this going to be, are these people going to actually help them? And they keep running into obstacles. It was just what the doctor ordered. I mean, it is a hilarious movie. My only complaint really about it is that it is a little bit sort of in that Horrible Bosses and Date Night sort of realm where it's they're kind of on the run and da 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 da. So it's we've seen Pineapple Express is another example. We've seen a couple of these types of tropes before, and the villains here are a little cartoony, I think. But I think easily the best comedy of the year. I mean, I've given a few A's out so far. The Invisible Man, the Beastie Boys movie, got an A+, maybe even. And then, what was my other A? Oh, Clemency, which is a hard-hitting drama. I think those are my only A's of the year. So, not really comedies. I'm not going to leave this with an A, because I think could have been improved upon a little bit. And the scenes where they're screaming at each other, really, you could have cut those down a little bit, because it was those parts were uncomfortable to watch. Although, them arguing about whether they could be on The Amazing Race, that's the crux of their argument. That was funny. But I don't know that we needed, 3 or 4 minutes of the argument. But, But I really like this movie a lot. It's an A- for me for The Lovebirds, and that's on Netflix right now. So up next, we're going to talk about Capone, and this is another movie that was going to go to theaters, and they decided to put it to the home audience instead. This stars Tom Hardy as Al Capone in the last year of his life. Once he's out of jail, the syphilis is really taking over, and he's going through some dementia issues and some brain issues because of the syphilis. And this one you can get for $9.99 to rent or $12.99 to buy. So, only a couple dollar difference there if you want to buy it. And like I said, Tom Hardy plays the famous gangster. His wife, May, is played by Linda Cardellini, who I've been enjoying very much on Dead to Me, and I've always enjoyed her work. And then some of the other people involved in this movie, Matt Dillon, Kyle MacLachlan as Capone's doctor. And basically, this movie is a mess. It's all over the place, first of all. And when I learned that the director is Josh, is it Trank? Yeah, Josh Trank. Well, his last directorial effort was Fan Four Stick, the horrible, horrible Fantastic Four movie that I failed. That really, like this movie, like Capone, just had no direction, had no clue of what it was trying to accomplish, who it was for, what it was trying to do. And, Trank has always said, oh, well, they who was it, Warner Brothers, I guess? I forget who owns Fantastic Four these days. I guess it's Fox, right? Because they're not part of the Marvel Universe that Disney owns. I think it's Fox, which, of course, I guess now is part of Disney. But anyway, at the time he was like, oh, the movie studio cut my movie up, and it wasn't my vision for the movie, da-da-da-da-da. Well, dude, if this is your vision for a movie, I don't know if they really mangled your movie or not. Like, your movie probably sucked to begin with, too. This is just, it's tonally everywhere. There's, like, several scenes of Capone, like, crapping himself or throwing up on himself. Or it's like, we get it, dude. The guy's losing his mind and he's losing control of his, faculties and his body. We got it. One of the key elements to this movie, plot-wise, is this $10 million that Capone supposedly hid somewhere, but because of the syphilis, he can't remember where, so they're trying to get it out of him, and the feds think he's lying and that he does know where it is. And to this day, it's never been recovered. I think that they were hoping that's what was in Al Capone's vault when Geraldo, went and searched it in the 80s. And, of course, watching this movie, I can't help but think of the great Simpsons gag where Homer's Barbershop Quartet sang the song about how there was nothing in Al Capone's vault, but it wasn't Geraldo's fault. And the memory of that Simpsons episode was far better than anything I saw in this movie, I'll tell you that. Tom Hardy, he is one of our great actors right now, I really think. I mean, he's first of all, a master at changing his voice. In Lawless, he had this very, thick Western Southern type drawl. And then in other movies, he's had other different accents. And in the one movie, he played the Cray twins. He played his own twin. I forget what that was called, but that was a pretty good movie. Legend, I think it was. And he's done so many different things. The Mad Max sort of way of speaking works for Mad Max Fury Road when Tom Hardy did it there. Doesn't work for Capone. In fact, it's almost laughable, and every time he didn't talk in a scene for like a minute and then he opened his mouth, I like almost laughed every time because it was such a put on fake weird accent. It's very gravelly, very mumbly. Tom Hardy loves a good mumble. He does it in several of his movies. And it's even worse when he has a face mask on in half his movies, like Dunkirk and Bane from The Dark Knight Rises, and then of course Mad Max. But he didn't have that here. But I will say, the makeup did a good job on him. He really had these bloodshot eyes for most of the movie that were. I'm not an eye person. They were real gross to look at. But okay. But then there's one scene, because he has all these, delusions because of the syphilis and his brain's going. In one scene, Matt Dillon literally takes his eyeballs out of their sockets and hands them to him. So I had to kind of turn away for literally like a minute of the movie. This scene goes on forever, and you could hear the the crunching of it, like, you know. So I think Trank wanted to give us this sort of element of disgust, which you succeeded there, I guess. But like, it didn't need to be there. Like, just tell the darn story. I don't need to be grossed out when I'm seeing a biopic, you know, unless it's of Jack the Ripper or something. But yeah, I mean, this movie is just a bust on just about every level. You know, the other people give some fine performances, Linda Cardellini, and, you know, but look, she couldn't turn in a bad performance if she tried. So that's fine. But she's such an almost supporting character to the story. You know, the real star of the movie, of course, is Tom Hardy as Capone, but the other star of the movie is the setting and the syphilis, and it's like the dream sequence. It's like everybody else is sort of ancillary. And so when you have a performance that is as over the top as Tom Hardy's, like if you thought his performance was over the top in Venom, this is a whole new over the top Tom Hardy. I'm not sure if he needs a good director to rein him in, or not, or if he just needs better movies. I mean, he's been in so many great movies, but the last like 2 or 3 years, some of these movies have really, maybe they've stretched his acting ability. I'll give him that, but boy, this was rough to get through and laughable at times, and just so over the top disgusting at others. I don't know. Trank did Chronicle as well, which I thought was a decent movie. I think I gave it like a B. I thought it was interesting. It was one of the first real popular found footage movies, really since Blair Witch. You know, there were a couple here or there, but that and Cloverfield really like reinvigorated the that sort of style of horror movie, the found footage. But this to me was just not good. I give Capone a D. Rough going. But the makeup was good. I'll give it that. Good makeup. All right, so up next and final is Blue Story, and this is available as well to stream. This was never going to be, I don't think, theatrically released. I think it was always sort of going to be like one of those, maybe in art houses or, you know, maybe at festivals only. But now we can all see it, and this is available to rent for $5.99 on Amazon, or you could buy this for $12.99, and I think your $12.99 would be a little more put to use with this movie than it would be to Capone. It was released overseas. It is a very, very English movie from Great Britain, and so it was released over there and in some of the foreign territories, but I'm not sure if there ever was a release strategy for the U.S. or not, but essentially it was directed by this dude Rap Man, and it takes a bunch of his YouTube videos from 2014 that was essentially a semi-autobiographical series that he did on YouTube, and basically turns it into a film. And so it is based on true events, based loosely on his own life. And basically it involves the best friends Marco and Timmy, who are from different areas of London with different gangs. One's from Peckham, one's from Deptford, and they find themselves in the middle of this brewing war between the two factions. And so essentially, look, you know, it takes a story that we've seen a lot, you know, with any sort of gang movie, including like West Side Story and things like that. And you could even reach it back, you know, to the Romeo and Juliet era of, you know, the Montagues and the Capulets and stuff. So look, you know, it doesn't tread any new ground, really, but that is one of the few flaws of the movie. You know, this movie overall is very good, real well done. You know, Ratman seems to be a fairly competent director, especially, you know, because he is telling his own story. The performances here are really good, too, and they're almost like a Cockney-type British accent, which personally I dig. I know it's a little hard to understand sometimes, so I definitely, you know, put my subtitles on for this one. But much like The Gentleman earlier this year with Matthew McConaughey, the Guy Ritchie movie, you know, this one is loaded with sort of that Cockney type of accent, you know, so it's very, very thick. But, yeah, I mean, the characters here are pretty well defined, even though they are sort of stock characters, but because Rap Man has based this on his own life, I think he was able to inject a little bit more than sometimes we see in these movies into the character. So I liked that part of it. I liked, the sort of defending your friend kind of thing, and then being involved with the wrong guys, and so all of that was good. My only other real criticism of this movie, though, is that there's like a couple of times, and by a couple probably more than two, like I would say maybe 3 or 4, so a few times in this movie it breaks into a rap video, and that's exactly what it is. And when it was Valley Girl that I reviewed last week, it sort of was like, okay, well that sort of makes sense. This is a jukebox musical, so it makes sense they're busting into song, in the middle of this park or whatever. But even that got a little old for me because they were running like montages over it. Here, it kind of took me right out of the movie. Now, there was a similar movie with the whole rap intermixed element a few years ago called Blind Spotting that I absolutely loved. I gave it an A+. Daveed Diggs starred in that. So good. I was just actually referencing that the other day when I was talking about Snowpiercer because Daveed Diggs stars in that. But, that was a little more, I felt, organic because it was set to look more like a musical in that respect. Look, Daveed Diggs comes from the world of Hamilton, so it's like we're used to sort of breaking into rap, at the drop of a hat, and our characters doing that. So I don't know, it just became more organic. This was more like, let's break from the movie and play you a rap video for 3 or 4 minutes. And because of the style of that, the rap just literally told us everything going on, from scene to scene, and it would include the people's names. So it's like, obviously they were raps tailor-made for this movie, and they would say the characters' names, and they would say what's going on, but sometimes it would just be like repeating what we just saw, and I'd be like, yeah, I already know that. Like, if you're gonna do a rap montage, at least advance the story so I know then what, and it did advance the story a little bit, but the first half of each rap would be like a recap of the previous 2 scenes, oh, he messed up, and, he did this, and I'm like, yeah, I just watched him mess up and do that. Like, you didn't need to tell me again. I'm not stupid. This isn't really a movie for dummies, so I do have to give it a little bit of a lesser grade for that. But yeah, the characters were great, the acting was great, and I do think that for a theme that has sort of been tread upon so many times, Ratman really did at least flesh out these characters a bit and make you feel for them a little more than some movies do. So I leave Blue Story with a B. So that's going to do it for the movies this week. I know there's a few more coming out. Probably my next movie review video next week will be of the Netflix and Hulu, maybe Variety, because I can't think of any other big theatrical movies that were going to be released in May that are now going to be out on demand. But I know there's a few more that have been announced. There was a Tom Hanks movie that was coming out in June or July, and that's going directly to Apple Plus in June. And there was one other one I just read about, and I can't think of what it was. But that was, I think, going to be released in June as well. And instead of pushing it back, they're putting it on one of the streamers or right on demand. So once there's another 3 or 4 of those, I'll collect those in a video. But until then, I think I'll just do, there's so many Netflix movies I haven't caught up on that were released in 2020, and they keep putting them out every week. There's like another 1 or 2. So that'll probably be my next movie review video. But stay tuned for my TV review videos. I'm going to be doing those weekly. HBO Max drops tomorrow, by the way, so I think I'm going to get the trial of that and give you an Is It Worth It video for that. What else? And then the final Frasier Friday, if you've been following along our Frasier videos, the final Frasier Friday is going to be this week for the last half of season 11. So check that out too. But other than that, like I said, I'm not going to be doing quarantine videos every day anymore. But probably you can still expect 4 to 5 a week. I mean, I've really been cranking out some videos on my channel lately, which I've been having a lot of fun with. So I'm not going to drop that, obviously, completely, but it will be a lot more than the 1 or 2 a week I used to do, back in the day. So hopefully you enjoy that. Hopefully you're all staying safe too, even though the quarantine's being lifted in some areas. I know some areas are still hit very hard, by what's going on. So hopefully you're staying safe. But thanks so much for watching, and we'll see you back here next time. Bye.